Imagine finally escaping slavery, and then spending the next 4 decades not really getting anywhere. That is where Israel's story awkwardly begins after leaving Egypt. They walk out free. Public enemy number one defeated, chains off, miracles still fresh in everyone's memory. Water turned into blood, plagues showed up on schedule, and the sea literally opened up to let them pass. From the outside, this looks like a flawless escape plan executed by a very powerful ally. Confidence is high. Spirits are even higher. The problem is that freedom arrives faster than direction. Israel is no longer enslaved, but they are also no longer anchored to anything familiar. Egypt is behind them. The Promised Land is ahead of them. Somewhere, eventually. No one is exactly sure how far, or how long, or what happens in between. That detail feels minor at first. There is a lot of excitement in the beginning. Everyone is motivated. Everyone is moving. Everyone agrees this was the right decision. Freedom has that effect. It creates energy before it creates clarity. But no one actually sat down and mapped out the journey. It's like quitting a toxic job after years of complaining about it, storming out with confidence, and then realizing halfway to the parking lot that there is no backup plan. It feels good to leave. It feels less good to ask, okay, now what? Israel is technically on its way to a destination. The promise exists. The goal exists. The problem is that the people themselves are not ready for what the destination requires. Freedom removed the chains, but it did not automatically rewrite habits, fears, or expectations. So they move forward with enthusiasm and very little alignment. At this stage, everything still looks fine. No one is panicking yet. No one is questioning the decision. The assumption is simple. Movement equals progress. As long as they are walking, they must be getting closer. That assumption will not age well. There is no clear route, no stable routine, no shared understanding of how this new life is supposed to work. Egypt is gone, but Egypt's mindset is still very much present. People expect clear orders, predictable provision, and immediate results. Freedom does not offer any of that. Instead, it offers uncertainty. This is where the tension quietly begins. Israel is free but not settled, hopeful but undefined, confident but unprepared. The journey is real, but the direction feels blurry, and that combination creates a very specific kind of problem. Not failure, not rebellion, not disaster yet, just motion without progress. And that, as it turns out, is the most dangerous kind of journey. Because once people start moving without actually advancing, the walk itself becomes the trap. Israel walks a lot, but somehow gets nowhere. They move constantly. March, stop, set up camp, tear it all down. Walk again, set up camp again. Repeat. From a distance, it looks productive. There is motion, effort, and a strong sense of activity. If movement were the goal, they would be winning. But movement is not the same thing as progress. Days blur together. The scenery barely changes. Sand today, sand tomorrow. More sand after that. The people are busy, but nothing actually moves forward. It's the ancient version of being booked all day and realizing at night that nothing important was resolved. Modern comparison, answering emails non-stop, attending meetings back-to-back, and somehow the real problem is still sitting there untouched. At first, people don't say much. They assume this is normal. Journeys take time. Big promises require patience. Everyone tells themselves to relax. Then the complaints start, quietly at first. A few comments here and there about the food, about the water, about how Egypt, strangely enough, had structure, predictability, a menu. Someone inevitably says, "At least back there we knew what we were eating." This is where things get interesting. Egypt was slavery. Everyone agrees on that. Nobody wants to go back officially, but nostalgia has a way of editing memories. Suddenly, Egypt feels less like captivity and more like a stable routine with benefits, and complaining becomes the new group activity. Nothing bonds people faster than shared frustration. One complaint turns into a conversation. The conversation turns into a pattern. Before long, dissatisfaction feels communal, organized, almost comforting. The desert hasn't changed. The walking hasn't changed. What changes is the mindset. The problem is not the heat, it's not the distance, it's not even the lack of resources. The real issue is expectation. Israel is free but still thinking like people who need constant external structure. They want clear instructions, immediate results, and visible guarantees. Freedom does not work that way. Instead of adapting, fear starts filling the gaps. Fear of scarcity, fear of the unknown, fear of responsibility. Doubt follows closely behind. Questions grow louder, confidence shrinks, and slowly, dependence replaces trust. Every obstacle feels bigger now. Every delay feels personal. Every inconvenience feels like proof that something went wrong back at the decision to leave. The walking continues, but the energy behind it changes. What started as hopeful movement turns into cautious survival. They are no longer walking towards something. They are walking to avoid standing still, and that is exhausting. By now, the journey feels endless. Not because it actually is, but because internally nothing has shifted. The same fears show up every day, just in slightly different forms. The same conversations repeat, the same doubts resurface. Israel is moving, but not maturing, and that creates a dangerous setup. Because when people are tired, uncertain, and mentally stuck, even good opportunities can feel threatening. And when the chance to truly move forward finally appears, everything starts to fall apart. They finally get close to the promised land and stop. After all the walking, the routines, the complaints, and the desert déjà vu, Israel reaches the edge of what they have been aiming for this whole time. This is it, the transition moment. The part where the journey is supposed to turn into arrival. So they do what seems reasonable. They send spies. A group goes ahead to check things out, scope the land, bring back information. Think of it as an early version of, let's just see what we're dealing with. Everyone agrees this is smart. Preparation feels responsible. No red flags yet. The spies return with a report, and the report splits the room immediately. One group talks about fertile land, resources, and opportunity. They see challenges, sure, but nothing unexpected. Big promise, big effort. That tracks. This group sounds cautiously optimistic, like people who know it won't be easy, but still believe it's worth it. The other group has a very different tone. They focus on obstacles. The people are strong, the cities are fortified, the task looks difficult, the risk feels high. The word impossible starts floating around. Same land, same facts, completely different conclusion. This is where fear takes the microphone. The conversation shifts fast. Opportunity gets buried under worst-case scenarios. Possibility gets drowned out by anxiety. The louder voices aren't necessarily the strongest ones. They're just the most afraid. Modern version. It's like canceling a project not because it can't work, but because someone said it would be complicated. No failure yet. Just anticipation of effort. And effort suddenly feels unacceptable. One side says, yes, it's hard, but this is what we signed up for. The other says, hard is a warning sign. Maybe this was a bad idea. Guess which side wins? Fear is very persuasive. It sounds practical. It uses logic selectively. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just needs to raise enough doubt to stall action. And that's exactly what happens. They don't lose the land because they lack strength. They lose it because they have too much fear. Instead of moving forward, they hesitate. Instead of stepping in, they step back. And once hesitation takes over, the decision becomes clear. They choose not to enter, not because there is nowhere to go, but because going forward feels scarier than going backward. Even though backward doesn't actually exist anymore, they talk about returning to Egypt, returning to something familiar, something structured, something predictable. Even if it was terrible, at least it was known. That decision doesn't cause immediate collapse. There's no dramatic explosion, no sudden punishment scene, just a quiet shift. The journey stretches, time loosens its grip, days turn into patterns, patterns turn into years, and the same walk continues, only now with an unspoken understanding. Something big was missed. This is the exact moment where progress stops pretending. From here on, nothing is accidental. The wandering is no longer about distance, it's about repetition, and this is where the official loop begins. Time passes, but nothing really changes. The walking continues. Camps still go up, camps still come down, the desert stays the desert. What slowly changes is the people. A new generation starts growing up in the sand. For them, this is normal life. They don't remember Egypt. They don't remember the dramatic exit or the rush of freedom. All they know is movement, routines, and stories about a place they've never seen. Meanwhile, the older generation doesn't move forward at all. Not geographically, not mentally. They stay stuck in the same patterns, the same conversations, the same fears. The journey keeps going, but advancement quietly stops being the goal. The desert becomes familiar. That's the strange part. What once felt temporary now feels standard. Complaints turn into background noise, expectations lower, survival replaces ambition. People stop asking when do we arrive and start asking what's for today. Modern version. It's like repeating the same mistake so many times that you forget what you were originally trying to fix. The problem becomes routine. The frustration becomes normal. The loop becomes life, and yet things keep happening. Food still shows up. Guidance still appears. Miracles don't stop just because momentum did. There are still moments of provision, direction, and protection. On paper, things are working, but so are the complaints. Every new solution is followed by a familiar reaction. Gratitude shows up briefly, then fades. Frustration takes over again. The pattern resets. It's like installing daily updates on a device that never actually gets better. New day, same version. Here's the irony, the physical distance was never the issue. The route itself wasn't complicated. The land wasn't unreachable. The delay had nothing to do with geography. The delay was internal. What slowed everything down wasn't the desert. It was what people carried into it. Old fears, old dependencies, old expectations that didn't survive freedom very well. So the desert quietly changes roles. It stops being a punishment zone and starts acting more like a waiting room. Not a dramatic one, a slow one. A place where time stretches just enough to force something deeper to shift. No immediate consequences, no dramatic endings, just repetition. And repetition has a way of teaching lessons people refuse to learn quickly. The desert becomes preparation, whether anyone likes it or not. Habits are exposed, motives are tested, mentalities get challenged, not all at once, slowly, patiently, over decades. Some people grow, some don't. The journey continues, but with a clear separation now. Those who are willing to change internally and those who keep waiting for the environment to do the work for them. That's what makes the 40 years feel so long. Not the distance, the resistance. And that leads to the most uncomfortable realization of the entire story. Because if the desert wasn't the problem, then something else was. And that raises a question no one really wants to ask. Israel spends 40 years going nowhere because freedom requires maturity. That's the uncomfortable summary. They leave Egypt physically, but Egypt doesn't leave them mentally. The chains are gone, but the habits stay. The fear stays. The need for constant reassurance stays. When decisions get difficult, hesitation wins. And when hesitation becomes a pattern, time turns into a consequence. This wasn't about distance. They didn't wander because the land was far away. They wandered because the mindset required to enter it never fully showed up. The problem wasn't movement. There was plenty of that. The problem was direction paired with readiness. They were busy, but not advancing. And that idea feels very familiar. Being active does not automatically mean being effective. You can be occupied all day and still avoid the one decision that actually changes things. You can switch environments, schedules, jobs, cities, or routines, and still carry the same patterns with you. Without internal change, new places just become new versions of the same loop. Modern version. It's like rearranging furniture in a room that still has a structural crack in the wall. Everything looks different for a moment. Then the problem shows up again. That's why the desert wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a wrong turn. It wasn't random punishment. It was the natural outcome of choices made under fear. When people choose safety over growth, repetition becomes the default setting. The desert simply made that visible. It slowed everything down enough to expose what hadn't changed yet, what needed time, what needed unlearning. Some people adapted, some didn't. And the timeline reflected that difference. Freedom opened the door. Maturity determined how long it stayed open. That's the part this story doesn't rush. It never says, try harder. It never says, move faster. It quietly shows that without internal shift, external progress stalls on its own. The problem was never the path. The problem was letting the past decide the future. And that's where the story pauses, not with a neat ending, but with a fork in the road. Because things do change later. Leadership shifts, momentum returns, decisions look different. But that's another chapter. So the question naturally becomes, what actually changed when Joshua stepped in? Or, just as interesting, why didn't Moses ever enter the land at all? Those answers explain what movement alone never could.